Welcome back to another episode of MBA's Teach Econ. In this lesson, we are going to discuss banks and how they make money. First, banks are the connection between the supply of capital and the demand for capital. The market for capital would be extremely inefficient if those with a demand had to search for those with a supply of savings. It's useful to examine the structure of a bank by taking a peek at their balance sheet. Their assets now are listed on the left, and their liabilities are listed on the right. The difference in assets minus liabilities is known as owner's equity, which is also listed on the right side of the balance sheet. This setup is referred to as a balance sheet because both sides of the balance sheet must equal each other, or balance. You can think of liabilities as obligations, so these are their obligations, and the assets as items of value. First, a bank takes in deposits from its customers. These deposits, while they're assets for the customers, are liabilities for the bank because the bank has to repay these deposits in the future. The bank then uses this money to make long-term investments such as mortgages, consumer loans, etc. And these are assets for the bank, money generation mechanisms. And they also maintain a government-mandated at least 10% in reserve, on hand, callable deposits. Now let's look at a hypothetical example. Let's say the bank takes in $9 in deposits and then makes profitable investments, and let's say they've returned $10 in long-term investments, and they keep at least 10% on hand, so they have $1 on hand. The asset side adds up to 11. So if we're adding assets and liabilities, we know the difference is owner's equity. So in this case, owner's equity would be 2. And now both sides balance. You'll notice that the value of the bank's deposits far exceeds the amount held in reserve. If all of the bank's depositors wanted their money at once, the bank would need to try to monetize their long-term investments at fire sale prices in order to meet the demand for withdrawals. In an effort to assure depositors, the FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, insures depositors up to $250,000. This is in an effort to avoid a run on the bank. Now, assuming our bank is run efficiently, it'll charge a higher interest rate, so the percentage it charges on these long-term investments is going to be greater than the percentage that it pays for deposits. And if you think about this in your life, this is obviously true. The bank would normally charge maybe, let's say, 7% on a consumer loan, while it only pays perhaps 1% on a deposit, if you're lucky. Now, the difference between long-term investments and deposits, this difference in interest rates is known as the spread. And in order to make more money, a bank might be tempted to increase its spread, or the difference between the interest it receives and the interest it pays. Now, if it takes too much risk, say they lend to risky borrowers and charge them a high interest rate, their long-term investments potentially could be marked down. Let's say they're marked down to 8. If these long-term investments are actually worth 8, the first thing to be reduced on the right side of the balance sheet will be the owner's equity. In this case, it would go to 0. Now, if at any time assets are less than liabilities, say Long-term investments get marked all the way down to 7, leaving us 8 on the asset side and 9 on the deposit side. This means that the bank has less money on hand than is necessary to pay all of its depositors back. Now, if this were ever to happen, the bank would be called insolvent. And the FDIC would attempt to negotiate a sale of the bank to a better capitalized bank, or simply liquidate the bank's assets in as orderly a manner as possible, in order to return as much money as possible to its depositors. So this is the life cycle of a bank, how they make money, and what happens in the event of insolvency. Thanks for listening to MBA's Teach Econ, and see you again soon.